Wyoming Territory, October 1884, Ethan Sawyer stood at the edge of his creek, rifle loose in his hand, watching three strangers in city suits measure water that didn't belong to them. The autumn sun cut low across the valley, painting everything in shades of copper and rust, and the wind carried the first real bite of approaching winter. He was 34 years old. He owned 2,000 acres of land, 10 horses, 40 head of cattle, and a ranch house he'd built with his own hands. He employed 9 men, paid them fair wages, and asked nothing of them except honest work and the courtesy of keeping their distance. Everything in his life was exactly as he'd designed it. Controlled. Isolated. Safe. The surveyor nearest the creek bank looked up, saw Ethan, and waved with the casual arrogance of a man who believed laws and paperwork trumped the reality of whose boots were planted in the dirt. "Mr. Sawyer," the man called out. "Just doing our job. Nothing personal." Ethan's hand tightened on the rifle. "Not raising it. Not yet. Just acknowledging its weight. Your job is 20 miles east on Western Consolidated land," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the water. "This creek runs through my property. Has for 3 years. The deeds registered, the water rights transferred legal. So I'll ask you once, what gives you the right to measure what's mine?" The surveyor exchanged glances with his companions. One of them, older, with the look of a company lawyer, stepped forward, pulling papers from his coat. "See, that's the interesting thing, Mr. Sawyer. We've been reviewing territorial records. Turns out this creek changed course about 20 years back. Big floods in '64 shifted a lot of boundaries. Your deed specifies water rights along the old channel. Current channel." He smiled, thin and professional. "Well, that's what we're here to determine. Could be disputed territory." The words landed like a fist to the gut. Ethan had bought this land because of the creek. Without reliable water, the ranch was nothing. "Dust and dreams and cattle that would die come summer. Get off my property," Ethan said quietly. "Now, we'll be filing a claim with the territorial surveyor's office," the lawyer continued, as if Ethan hadn't spoken. "Western Consolidated has significant mineral deposits upstream. We'll need water access for processing. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement." "No arrangement. No claim. No access." Ethan raised the rifle now, not pointing it at anyone but making his position clear. "You've got 30 seconds to pack your tools and ride out. After that, I stop being polite." They left. Slowly, making a show of their lack of concern. But they left. Ethan stood by the creek long after they'd gone, watching the water flow over stones that had been there longer than any deed or survey or legal fiction. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. From rage. From the terrible certainty that the isolation he'd built so carefully was about to be tested. He heard footsteps behind him. Samuel Porter, his foreman, 60 years old, weathered as barn wood, and one of the few people Ethan trusted. "They'll be back," Sam said quietly. "Men like that always come back. Let them, Ethan." Sam's voice carried a weight that made Ethan turn. "You can't fight Western Consolidated alone. They've got lawyers, political connections, money. You need help. I need them to leave me the hell alone. That's not how the world works, and you know it." Sam pulled a folded newspaper from his pocket. "This came on today's supply wagon. I placed the advertisement like you asked." "Got a response." Ethan stared at the paper. He'd agreed to hire a cook because Sam had pushed and the men had threatened to quit over Pete's attempts at food. But that had been weeks ago, back when Western Consolidated was just a rumor, before everything felt like it was unraveling. "Tell them the position's filled," Ethan said. "It's not filled. Pete set a boot nail in Tommy's beans last week. The boy nearly broke a tooth." Sam held out the telegram that had been tucked inside the newspaper. "She's already on her way. Arriving this afternoon. Woman named Clara Hartwell, says she's got 9 years experience cooking in boarding houses. References from Clearwater, 30 miles south. Far enough to be a different world, close enough to make hiring reasonable. Ethan took the telegram, read the brief lines. Professional. Direct. No unnecessary words. The kind of communication he could respect. 1 season, he said. That's all. Come spring, she goes. 1 season, Sam agreed. But something in the old man's eyes suggested he didn't believe it. She appeared just after noon, materializing through the autumn haze like something conjured by the land itself. Ethan watched from the barn as the rider approached, a woman alone on a rented mare, sitting the saddle with the stiff precision of someone who'd learned to ride out of necessity rather than joy. Even from a distance, he could see the set of her shoulders. Straight as a surveyor's line. Ready for a fight, Sam appeared at his elbow. That'll be her, probably. You planning to greet her, or should I? Ethan grabbed his work gloves from the fence post, buying himself a moment. He didn't want this. Didn't want the complication of another person in his carefully maintained world. Especially not a woman. Women noticed things. Asked questions. Tried to make connections he'd spent 3 years severing, but the men needed to eat. And Ethan was practical if nothing else. He walked out to meet her as she dismounted, her movements economical and sure. When she turned to face him, he got his first clear look, mid-20s, maybe younger. Dark hair pulled back severe enough to give her a permanent look of mild disapproval. Not beautiful in the soft way of the town women he occasionally saw in Carterville. But striking. Like a good knife was striking, all clean lines and obvious purpose. Then he saw her eyes, hazel. With amber flecks that caught the afternoon light, his chest tightened. For just a moment, he was back in that Cheyenne hospital room, watching different hazel eyes fight to stay focused on his face. Don't let this break you, Mr. Sawyer. Her voice cut through the memory. Practical. Direct. I'm Clara Hartwell. He forced himself back to the present. Miss Hartwell, your telegram said room and board, 1 season, $40, that's the arrangement. Then show me the kitchen, not a request. A statement of fact. Ethan felt something that might have been irritation or might have been interest. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Might want to settle your horse first, he said. Rented her in town. Stable boys coming for her tomorrow. Clara turned toward the cookhouse without waiting for his response, her carpet bag swinging from one gloved hand. The kitchen, Mr. Sawyer. Sam made a sound that might have been a cough or might have been a laugh. Ethan shot him a look and led the way. The cookhouse door stuck. It always did, swollen with years of moisture and neglect, and Ethan had to put his shoulder into it. The smell hit first, old grease, burned coffee, and the particular staleness of a room that had seen too many men and not enough fresh air. Weak afternoon light filtered through windows so filmed with smoke and dust they barely qualified as transparent. Pete's idea of cooking involved a wood stove black with char, a work table sticky with something Ethan didn't want to identify, and a collection of pots that looked like they'd survived a small war. Clara Hartwell stood in the doorway for a long moment, surveying the damage with the expression of a general assessing a particularly stupid battlefield decision. This is where you expect me to cook, she said. This is where Pete's been cooking. I expect you to do better. She turned to look at him, and those hazel eyes held the kind of assessment that made him want to check if his shirt was buttoned right. I'll need a full day to make this usable. Today's Monday. It is. She set her carpet bag down with careful precision. Then I'll serve first meal Wednesday breakfast. Until then, your men eat whatever Pete's been feeding them. They'll mutiny. Then you should have hired a cook before the place became a health hazard. She began cataloging out loud, pointing at each failure. New stove pipe, that one's about to fall and take the roof with it. Fresh whitewash for the walls. Real glass for those windows, not oilcloth. Hot water, lye soap, every rag you can spare. The arrangement was $40 for the season, Ethan said. I'm not rebuilding the place. The arrangement, Clara said quietly, was for a kitchen. This is a disaster wearing a roof. You want edible food, these are the terms. She paused, and something shifted in her expression. Not softness exactly, but practical honesty. I've cooked in worse, Mr. Sawyer. But I won't cook in dangerous. That stovepipe fails, it could burn the whole building. Maybe the barn too, if the wind's wrong. She was right. Ethan hated that she was right. I'll send Sam to town for supplies tomorrow. Good. Clara turned back to survey her new domain. I'll need my room now. To sleep and store my things, through there. Ethan nodded to the door at the back of the cookhouse. The room beyond was barely larger than a closet, narrow bed, washstand, window facing east toward the creek. It had been the foreman's quarters before they'd built the bunkhouse. Clara walked through, her footsteps careful on the warped floorboards. He heard her set down her bag. Heard the creak of the bed frame as she tested the mattress. When she returned, she'd removed her hat, and he could see the tiredness around her eyes. The kind that came from long travel and the weight of decisions made and unmade. One season, she said. Business arrangement. I cook, you pay. Come spring, we're square, that's the deal, then we understand each other, Mr. Sawyer. She moved toward the stove, already cataloging what needed to be cleaned first. I'll start tonight. Work through tomorrow. Wednesday morning, 6 o'clock, I expect 12 men for breakfast, we're 10. Counting me and Sam, then I'll plan for 12. Men always eat more than they say they will. She glanced back at him. Was there something else? There wasn't. Shouldn't be. But Ethan found himself standing in the doorway like a fool, watching her begin the impossible task of transforming chaos into order. Supper's at 6. He said. Someone will ring the bell, I'll eat here tonight. Need to inventory supplies, suit yourself. He turned to leave, made it 3 steps before her voice stopped him. Mr. Sawyer. He looked back. Clara stood beside the work table, one hand resting on the scarred wood. For just a moment, something vulnerable flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by that practical armor. Thank you, she said. For the chance to prove myself. You haven't proved anything yet. I will. He believed her. Tuesday passed in a blur of activity that Ethan told himself he wasn't paying attention to. Sam rode to town and returned with a wagon full of supplies. New stove pipe. Proper glass. Whitewash. And at Clara's detailed request, flour, sugar, salt, coffee, dried beans, bacon, and a list of other staples that made the general store owner ask if they were feeding an army. Ethan found himself inventing reasons to check the cookhouse. Helping install the stove pipe, Clara directed while he and Sam did the actual work, her instructions precise as surveyor's measurements. Bringing in firewood, she'd already organized it by size and dryness. Asking if she needed anything else, she rattled off 3 more items without looking up from the dough she was kneading. Each time, he told himself it was practical concern. Making sure she had what she needed. Protecting his investment. But he noticed things that had nothing to do with business. The efficient way her hands worked. The small line that appeared between her eyebrows when she concentrated. The fact that she hummed sometimes, barely audible, some tune he didn't recognize, when she thought no one was listening. Tuesday evening, he found her whitewashing the walls, her hair tied back with a piece of string, paint speckling her arms. You don't have to do that tonight, he said. I want it clean. She didn't stop working, her brush strokes steady and even. Fresh start, the words hung between them, carrying more weight than they should. You running from something back in Clearwater? The question came out before Ethan could stop it. The brush paused. Clara turned to look at him, and her hazel eyes held something harder than he'd seen before. Are you running from something, Mr. Sawyer? Out here alone, nobody permanent, everything at arm's length. The question landed like a fist to the sternum. That's different, is it? She turned back to the wall. Maybe we both just wanted something different. Maybe that's enough. He left her to her work, unsettled in ways he couldn't name. That night, lying in his bed in the main house, he heard her moving around the cookhouse. The creak of floorboards. The quiet clatter of pots being organized. Building her territory. Making it hers, one season, he reminded himself. Business arrangement. Keep it simple, but sleep was slow to come. And when it did, his dreams were full of hazel eyes and the smell of fresh bread. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of October day that promised winter wasn't far behind. Ethan woke before dawn from habit, pulled on his clothes, and stepped outside to find frost silvering the grass. Light already glowed in the cookhouse windows. The bell rang at 6 exactly, its sound clear in the still morning air. The bunkhouse door opened and the crew emerged, 9 men in various states of wakefulness, drawn by habit and hunger. Sam caught Ethan's eye and raised an eyebrow. Here we go, the cookhouse door stood open. Warm air spilling out into the cold morning. Ethan followed his crew inside and stopped. The transformation was complete. Clean windows let in the early light. Whitewashed walls reflected it, making the space feel twice its size. The old table had been scrubbed until the wood showed its original grain, set with tin plates and cups organized with military precision. The stove radiated heat. And the smells, Ethan's mouth watered before his brain could catalog them. Coffee. Real coffee, not the burned chicory Pete had been serving. Bacon. Something sweet and yeasty that made his stomach remind him he'd skipped supper. Clara stood at the stove, her back straight, her movements efficient. She'd braided her hair, and she wore a clean apron over a practical dress. When she turned, her face showed the exhaustion of 2 days' brutal work, but her eyes were steady. Sit, she said, not harsh. Not soft. Just absolute certainty that she was in charge here. The crew sat. Ethan found himself at the head of the table without quite meaning to, Sam at his right. The younger hands filled in the sides, and he could see them noticing everything, the clean space, the organized supplies, the woman who had accomplished in 2 days what Pete hadn't managed in 2 years. Clara moved between table and stove with the grace of long practice. Plates arrived, biscuits, actual biscuits. Golden and steaming, alongside bacon fried crisp, eggs cooked to order, and gravy that made Pete's attempts look like an insult to flour. Coffee followed, strong and hot and real. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were forks on plates, the scrape of chairs, the occasional satisfied grunt. Ethan watched his crew eat like men who'd been starving without knowing it. Watched them look at their plates with something close to reverence. Halfway through the meal, young Tommy Wilson, 18 years old and still growing into his height, set down his fork and spoke, "Ma'am." Clara turned from the stove. "This is the best meal I've had since I left home." "Then your mother's a good cook," Clara said. "Eat your fill." There was more. Biscuits kept coming. Bacon kept arriving. Coffee kept flowing. When the meal ended, when even Tommy admitted defeat, Clara stood at the stove and addressed them directly. "I'm Clara Hartwell. I'll be cooking for you through winter. I expect plates scraped clean and stacked by the door when you're done. Breakfast is 6. Dinner is noon. Supper is 6. You're late, you eat cold. You complain about the food, you're welcome to cook your own." She paused. Questions, silence. Then Sam cleared his throat. "Just one, Miss Hartwell. You planning to cook like this every day?" "I'm planning to cook like I've been trained to cook, Mr. Porter. Whether that meets your standards remains to be seen." The ghost of a smile touched Sam's weathered face. "I expect we'll manage to tolerate it." The crew filed out, and Ethan heard their voices carry across the yard. Wonder. Satisfaction. The particular contentment of men well fed. He remained at the table, watching Clara begin the work of cleaning up, her movements already falling into efficient rhythm. you set a high bar for yourself," he said, "better than setting a low one." She stacked plates with careful precision. "Will it do, Mr. Sawyer? It'll do." The words came out rougher than he intended. More than, something flickered across her face. Pleasure. Maybe. Or just satisfaction of a job done right. Good. Then we're square for today. He should leave. The work was waiting. The ranch didn't run itself. But he found himself standing, moving to the work table, picking up a dish towel. "What are you doing?" Clara asked. "Helping. That's not part of the arrangement, neither is cooking like that." He started drying plates, found the rhythm of it. Wash, dry, stack. "You spent 2 days making this place work. Least I can do is help clean up once," she didn't argue. But he felt her watching him, assessing. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the splash of water, the clink of dishes. Outside, he could hear the crew heading to work. Their voices lighter than they'd been in weeks. "Your men are good workers," Clara said finally. "They are, the young one. Tommy. He's homesick." Ethan glanced at her. "How do you know?" The way he looked at the biscuits. "Like they reminded him of something he's missing." She scrubbed a pot with focused intensity. "I've seen that look before. You get homesick sometimes." She rinsed the pot, set it aside. "I left for a reason. Going back isn't an option." The words carried weight, and Ethan recognized the finality in them. Whatever complicated situation she'd left behind in Clearwater, it wasn't calling her home. "The one season," he said carefully. "What happens after?" "I don't know yet." Tessa met his eyes. "Does it matter?" "It shouldn't. That was the whole point of temporary arrangements. They ended cleanly. No complications. No attachments." "No," he said. "I suppose it doesn't," but the words felt like a lie even as he spoke them. The days fell into rhythm after that. Ethan woke before dawn, found light already glowing in the cookhouse windows. The bell rang at 6, and the crew gathered for meals that became the center of their days: biscuits and gravy. Roast and potatoes. Stews that simmered all afternoon and filled the evening air with the promise of home. Clara ruled her domain with quiet authority. The cookhouse became sacred space, always clean. Always organized, always warm. She learned the crew's preferences without being asked. Tommy liked extra gravy. Sam wanted his coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Old Pete, demoted from cook but grateful for it, couldn't stomach onions. She adjusted. And the crew responded with loyalty that bordered on reverence. Ethan found himself timing his work to be near the cookhouse. Checking on horses that lived closer to the barn. Inspecting fence that ran past the building. Inventing reasons to stop by, to ask questions, to see if she needed anything. He told himself it was concern. She was his employee. His responsibility, but he knew, in the part of himself he tried to ignore, that he was breaking his own rules. Seeking her out. Looking for her. 2 weeks in, as October bled toward November, everything changed. It started with a rider approaching from the south road. Too deliberate for a drifter. Too well-dressed for ranch work. Ethan was in the barn when Sam found him, the old foreman's face grim. "Trouble," Sam said quietly. "Lawyer from town. And he's not alone." They walked out together to find not just the lawyer, Edward Collier, the same man who'd been with the surveyors, but 2 other men. Rough work clothes. Hard eyes. The kind of men who got paid to make problems disappear. Collier smiled when he saw Ethan, thin and professional. "Mr. Sawyer. Beautiful morning, state your business." "Direct." "I appreciate that." Collier pulled papers from his coat. "Western Consolidated has filed a formal claim with the Territorial Surveyor's Office. Creek rights dispute, based on the 1864 boundary shifts. We're prepared to offer fair compensation for water access, or we can settle this in court." His smile widened. "Though I should warn you, litigation is expensive. And Western Consolidated has very deep pockets." The threat was clear. "Agree to their terms, or be bled dry by legal fees." Before Ethan could respond, the cookhouse door opened. Clara emerged, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the cold. She looked between them, reading the tension immediately. "Trouble?" she asked quietly. "Mining company," Ethan said, keeping his voice level. "Wants my creek. Will they take it?" "Not if I can help it." Clara's eyes flicked to Collier, to the two hard-faced men with him. Understanding dawned, then one of the hard-faced men stepped forward, and his eyes locked on Clara. "Miss Hartwell," he said, and there was something ugly in his smile. Long way from Clearwater, Clara went absolutely still. Ethan saw it, the way fear locked her body, the way her breathing changed. "You know him?" Ethan asked quietly. "They work for Victor Brennan." Clara's voice came out barely above a whisper. "The man I told you about, the man who trapped her father with a fraudulent marriage contract." The man Clara had run from. The hard-faced man pulled an envelope from his coat. "Mr. Brennan sends his regards. Says to tell you he's a patient man, but patience has limits. You've had your little adventure. Time to come home and honor your commitments." "I have no commitments to Victor Brennan." "See, that's where you're wrong." The man's smile widened. "Your father's loan comes due in 3 months. And that marriage clause isn't going anywhere. Mr. Brennan figured you might be stubborn about it, so he asked us to deliver a message." He waved the envelope. "Things have gotten complicated for your father. Accidents happen in boarding houses. Fires. Structural failures. Be a shame if something happened because you were being difficult." The threat hung in the cold air, ugly and unmistakable, and then Ethan saw it. Saw Collier and Brennan's men exchange a glance. A nod. The kind of recognition that came from working together. "You're with them," Ethan said quietly, looking at Collier. "Western Consolidated and Brennan. You're working together." Collier's professional smile never wavered. "Mr. Brennan has business interests with Western Consolidated. We help each other out. He wants the lady. We want your creek. Everybody gets what they need, except you two. If you keep being difficult." The pieces clicked together. This wasn't two separate threats. This was coordinated. A deliberate strategy to pressure both of them at the same time. Using each other's vulnerabilities as leverage, Ethan stepped forward, putting himself between Clara and Brennan's men. "Get off my property," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "All of you. Now, we're going." Collier tucked his papers away. "But think about it, Mr. Sawyer. Think about whether one stubborn woman is worth losing everything you've built. And Miss Hartwell." He tipped his hat. "Your father's counting on you to make the right choice." They rode out slowly, making a show of their lack of concern. When they were gone, Clara swayed slightly. Ethan caught her elbow, steadied her. "Inside," he said softly. "Come on." He guided her into the cookhouse, settled her into a chair. Her face had gone past pale to gray, and her hands shook when she tried to pick up her coffee cup. "He found me," she whispered. "I thought I had time. Thought he'd leave my father alone if I just stayed away." What did they mean about commitments? Ethan crouched beside her chair. "Clara, what hold does Brennan have on you?" And she told him. All of it. Victor Brennan had loaned her father money 2 years ago when the boarding house was struggling. $5,000. Presented it as an investment, as partnership. But there were conditions written into the contract. If her father defaulted, the property transferred to Brennan, and Clara had agreed to marry Victor within 2 years. Or the loan came due immediately. "That's not legal," Ethan said. "You can't bind someone to marriage in a contract." "Maybe not. But the loan is legal, and my father can't pay it back." Clara finally met his eyes, and he saw desperation there. If I don't go back, Brennan takes the boarding house. It's all my father has. It'll destroy him. How long until the loan comes due? 3 months, 3 months. $40 for a season's work. Nowhere near enough to pay off a $5,000 loan, and now Brennan was pressuring her, threatening her father, using Western Consolidated's legal attack as additional leverage. Sam appeared in the doorway, his weathered face grave. Heard most of that. It's worse than we thought, it's coordinated, Ethan said, standing. Brennan wants Clara. Western Consolidated wants my water. They're pressuring both of us at the same time. Divide and conquer. Make us think we have to choose. I'm not choosing, Ethan said, the words coming out hard and certain. We fight both of them. Clara stood, her hands still shaking but her voice gaining strength. Luke, be realistic. You can't afford lawyers for your own case, much less mine. Western Consolidated has resources. Brennan has connections. We're outmatched, then we get creative. An idea was forming. You said your father's in Clearwater, yes. Why? Because maybe we stop reacting and start pushing back. Ethan turned to Sam. Western Consolidated filed their claim with the territorial surveyor. That's public record. We can see exactly what they're arguing, find the holes in their case. He turned back to Clara. And Brennan's contract might have holes too. We need to see it. Find out exactly what it says, what the terms are. Maybe there's a way out that doesn't involve you marrying a man who terrorizes your family. You're talking about going to Clearwater, I'm talking about fighting. Ethan caught her hands, held them steady. You told me we face this together. That means we don't surrender. We don't run. We go to Clearwater. We look at the contract. We find leverage. That's a lot of fighting for one trip. Then we better be strategic about it. He looked at Sam. How long to Clearwater? 30 miles south. You could make it in 4 hours if you pushed. We leave tomorrow, Ethan decided. First light. Sam, you're in charge here. Clara pulled her hands free, wrapped her arms around herself. This is insane. We're 2 people against a mining company and a man with political connections. What makes you think we can win? Ethan moved closer, gentled his voice. Because we're not just 2 people. We've got truth on our side. The real history of that creek. The real terms of that contract. And we've got something they can't buy or bully. What? We've got each other. She looked at him for a long moment. Testing the words, measuring their weight. Then slowly, she nodded, all right. Together, then. We fight, together, Ethan confirmed. That night, Ethan sat at his desk trying to remember everything he knew about the property when he bought it. The water rights had been clear. He was certain of that. But certainty wasn't proof, and Western Consolidated would have documentation to support their claim, manufactured or not. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Clara stood in the doorway, shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the cold. Can I come in? Of course. She stepped inside, and Ethan became suddenly aware of how sparse the room was. Desk, chair, bed. Nothing else. No decoration. No warmth, sorry. It's not much, it's honest, Clara said. No pretense. Just function. She moved to the window, looked out at the dark yard. I'm scared, Ethan. His first name. She'd never used it before. More scared than I've been since I left Clearwater, I know, but I'm also angry. She turned to face him, and fire lit in her hazel eyes. Brennan thinks he can own me. Western Consolidated thinks they can steal from you. And they're working together because they think we're weak. Divided. Easy to break, we're not, no. The fire burned brighter. We're not. And tomorrow, we're going to prove it. Ethan crossed to her, unable to stay away. Whatever we find in Clearwater. Whatever the contract says, we'll handle it. I promise you that. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not. He reached up, cupped her face gently. I'm promising to fight. I'm promising not to give up. I'm promising that whatever comes, you don't face it alone. Clara leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. I never expected this. When I came here, I was just running. But you. She opened her eyes, met his gaze. You made me want to stop running. Made me want to stay and fight and build something real. I never wanted any of this, Ethan admitted. The attachment. The risk. The possibility of losing something that matters. But you're right. It's better than being safe and alone. Is it? Her voice was barely a whisper. Even when it's this terrifying, especially then. He drew her closer, and she came willingly, resting her forehead against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, felt her breathe, felt the steady beat of her heart against his. For a moment, just a moment, Emma's face flashed through his mind. Those hazel eyes. That last whispered plea, don't let this break you. Live, maybe this was what she'd meant. Not hiding. Not running. But choosing to risk everything for the possibility of something real. We're going to win this, Clara, he said quietly. Both fights. I don't know how yet, but we will. You sound certain. I am certain. Because the alternative, letting them take everything we've built, everything we're building, that's not acceptable. She pulled back enough to look up at him. In the lamplight, her face showed all the emotions she usually kept hidden. Fear and hope and determination and something deeper. Ethan Sawyer, she said softly. When did you become an optimist? When I had something worth being optimistic about. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, let his hand linger. When I had someone worth fighting for, the kiss happened inevitably. Naturally. Like it had been waiting for them all along, soft at first. Tentative. Then deeper as fear transformed into need, into the desperate human requirement to hold on to something good in the face of uncertainty. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, and Ethan pulled her closer, trying to communicate everything he couldn't say, that she mattered, that this mattered, that he would burn the world down before he let anyone hurt her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara rested her forehead against his. That was probably a mistake, she whispered, probably. We have enough complications already, we do. We should maintain professional distance. Keep things simple, we absolutely should. Ethan kissed her again, briefer this time but no less certain. Are we going to? Clara asked, no. He traced the line of her jaw with his thumb. Apparently not, good. She laughed. Shaky but real. Because I'm done pretending this is just a business arrangement. Done pretending I don't care what happens to you. I know it's fast. It's reckless. It's everything I swore I'd never do. He stopped, found the words. But standing here with you, knowing what we're about to face. I'd rather have this, whatever this is, for however long we get it, than spend the rest of my life safe and empty. Clara's eyes shone with tears she didn't let fall. You're going to break my heart, Ethan Sawyer, then we'll break even, he smiled, trying for lightness. Because you've already broken mine. She kissed him again, and this time there was promise in it. And defiance. And the particular courage of people who choose to love even when the odds are against them. When she finally pulled away, she was smiling. We should sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Stay, the word escaped before Ethan could stop it. Just for a while. I don't. He struggled for honesty. I don't want to be alone tonight. Clara studied him, then nodded. All right. For a while, they settled on his bed, fully clothed and carefully positioned, but touching. Her head on his shoulder. His arm around her waist. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled. But inside they were warm. Together. Building something fragile and fierce in the darkness. Tell me about your father. Clara said softly. Not the warnings. Not the fear. Tell me about before. Ethan thought back past the grief and drinking to earlier memories. He loved my mother like breathing. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. They'd dance in the kitchen, no music, just holding each other and swaying. He'd bring her wildflowers from the meadow, and she'd put them in mason jars all over the house. That sounds beautiful, it was. His voice roughened. And then it wasn't. Because she died, and he couldn't function without her. He told me love was the most dangerous gamble a person could take. That he'd lost everything that mattered when he lost her, but he had you. I wasn't enough. I couldn't be. The old pain surfaced, familiar and dull. That's what scared me most. Not that loving someone could hurt, but that it could make you forget everyone else who needed you. Make you so focused on what you lost that you couldn't see what you still had. Clara was quiet for a moment. My father loved my mother desperately too. Still does. But when she died, he chose differently. He chose to keep living. To honor her by taking care of me. By building something she'd be proud of. She shifted to look at Ethan. Same loss. Different choice. Maybe it's not love that destroys people. Maybe it's how we handle grief. The word settled into him, testing against everything he believed for 10 years. Maybe, he said quietly, or maybe, Clara settled back against him. Some people have better reasons to stay strong. Your father lost his purpose when he lost your mother. But if we build something together, we won't be each other's only reason. We'll be partners. Not dependencies. Does that make sense? It did. More than Ethan wanted to admit, it made perfect sense. His father had built his entire existence around his mother, had made her the center of everything. When she died, the center collapsed, but what Clara was describing was different. Two people standing together, supporting each other, but not consuming each other. Building a life that was bigger than just their relationship. Yeah, he said. It makes sense. They lay in comfortable silence after that. And eventually, Clara's breathing evened out into sleep. Ethan stayed awake longer, watching shadows shift across the ceiling. Thinking about tomorrow and everything that could go wrong, but mostly he thought about the woman sleeping trustingly in his arms. About the crew that depended on him. About the ranch that had become more than just property. He thought about having something to fight for instead of just something to protect, and he thought that maybe, just maybe, his father had been wrong. Maybe love wasn't the most dangerous gamble, maybe the most dangerous thing was refusing to gamble at all. When Clara stirred hours later, dawn still an hour away, Ethan was ready. Time to go, she asked sleepily. Time to fight, he corrected. She smiled, fierce and determined in the pre-dawn darkness. Then let's go win. They rode out before sunrise, the horses' breath steaming in the cold November air. Ethan had packed light, bedrolls, supplies for 2 days, and the property deed wrapped in oilcloth. Clara sat her borrowed mare with growing confidence, her carpet bag secured behind her saddle, her face set with the kind of determination that came from having no choice but to be brave. The first miles passed in silence, both of them conserving energy for what lay ahead. The sun rose slowly, painting the eastern sky in shades of copper and gold, and Ethan found himself acutely aware of everything, the creak of leather, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats, the way Clara's profile looked against the morning light. If this went wrong, if they lost everything, at least he'd have this. One perfect morning, riding toward an uncertain future with someone worth fighting for. Tell me about your father, he said when they stopped to water the horses at a creek crossing. Clara knelt at the water's edge, splashing her face. Stubborn. Kind. Too trusting for his own good. She smiled, but sadness lived behind it. He wanted to give people second chances. Wanted to believe everyone had good in them. That's how Brennan got his hooks in. Came in charming, talking about investment opportunities and partnership. By the time my father saw the truth, it was too late. How bad is the boarding house? Bad enough that the loan made sense at the time. We needed repairs, needed capital to attract better clientele. Brennan promised fairness, promised reasonable terms. She stood, drying her hands on her skirt. The marriage clause was presented as a joke at first. Just a way to formalize his interest in me, he said. Make his intentions known. My father thought it was romantic, and you? I thought it was a trap. Clara's voice hardened. But I signed anyway. Because refusing would have meant my father losing everything immediately. At least this way, I bought us time we're going to use. Ethan helped her back onto her horse, his hand lingering on hers for a moment. Whatever that contract says, there's a way out. We just have to find it. They pushed on, following the road south through territory that grew increasingly familiar to Clara. She pointed out landmarks, a lightning-struck pine, a rock formation that looked like a crouching bear, the turnoff to a ranch owned by a family she'd known growing up. Each mile brought them closer to Clearwater. Closer to confrontation. By mid-afternoon, they could see the town in the distance, a collection of buildings huddled in a valley where three creeks converged. Larger than Ethan had expected, with a main street that suggested prosperity and a church steeple that rose above the surrounding structures. The boarding house is on Oak Street, Clara said quietly. 2 blocks past the bank. You'll know it by the blue shutters. My mother painted them that color because she said it reminded her of morning glories. We'll go straight there. No. She shook her head. If Brennan has men watching, I don't want to lead them straight to my father. We should get rooms at the hotel first. Make it look like business. Then visit separately. Ethan admired her tactical thinking even as he hated the necessity of it. They rode into Clearwater as the sun began its descent, 2 travelers among many, drawing little attention. The hotel, grand, according to the sign, though the paint was peeling, offered rooms without questions, and Ethan paid for 2, though he suspected only one would be used. I'll go to my father's after dark, Clara said when they were alone in the hallway outside their rooms. Less chance of being seen. I'm coming with you. Ethan kept his voice low but firm. Not negotiable. We're together in this, remember? That means I don't let you walk into potential danger alone. She looked like she wanted to argue. But something in his expression must have convinced her. All right. Together, they waited until full dark, then slipped out the hotel's back entrance and made their way through Clearwater streets. The town felt different at night, smaller, more intimate, with lamplight spilling from windows and the distant sound of a piano playing somewhere. Ethan stayed close to Clara, watching for threats, but the streets were quiet. Peaceful, even. The boarding house appeared exactly as she described, 3 stories of weathered wood with blue shutters, a wide porch, and a sign that read, Hartwell House, clean rooms, good meals, but up close, Ethan could see the deterioration Clara had mentioned. Sagging porch boards, shutters hanging crooked, roof shingles missing in patches. The building had the look of a place slowly surrendering to gravity and time. Clara's hand trembled as she knocked. A moment later, the door opened, revealing a man in his 50s with Clara's hazel eyes and hair gone silver at the temples. His face lit up with shock and joy and fear all at once. Clara. My girl. What are you? He pulled her into his arms, and Ethan heard her breath catch, heard the tears she'd been holding back finally break free. I told you not to come back, Henry Hartwell said, pulling away to look at her. Told you to stay safe. I had to see you. Papa, this is Ethan Sawyer. He owns the ranch where I've been working. Ethan, my father. Henry's handshake was firm despite the tremor Ethan noticed in his hands. Mr. Sawyer. I appreciate you bringing my daughter here, but she shouldn't have come. It's not safe. We need to see the contract, Ethan said. The one with Brennan. Henry's face paled. You told him. He needed to know. Clara moved into the boarding house's front parlor, and Ethan followed. The interior matched the exterior, worn but clean, furniture old but cared for, the smell of cooking and wood polish and faded hope. We think there might be a way out, Clara continued. But we need to see the exact terms. There's no way out, girl. I've been over it 100 times with every lawyer in 3 counties. The contract's ironclad. Henry sank into a chair, suddenly looking much older than his years. Brennan had it drawn up by someone who knew what they were doing. 2 years from signing, you marry him, or the loan comes due in full. I can't pay it, Clara. Even if I sold everything, I'd still be short. When does the 2 years end? Ethan asked. February 1st. Just over 2 months. Henry pulled out a pocket watch, studied it like it might tell him something other than the time. I've been trying to figure something out. Trying to find buyers for the property that might pay enough to clear the debt. But word got around about Brennan's claim. Nobody wants to touch it. Where's the contract now? Lockbox in my room. Henry studied Ethan for a long moment, then nodded wearily. But seeing it won't change anything, he climbed the stairs, returned with a metal box, unlocked it with a key from his watch chain, and produced a sheaf of papers bound with ribbon. Ethan spread them on the parlor table, and Clara moved to stand beside him, her shoulder touching his. The contract was exactly as bad as advertised. Brennan had loaned Henry $5,000 at what looked like reasonable interest, to be repaid over 5 years with monthly installments. But buried in the terms was the marriage clause, within 24 months of signing. Clara would marry Victor Brennan, at which point the loan would be forgiven and ownership of the boarding house would transfer to their joint names. If she refused, the entire loan became due immediately, with penalty interest that nearly doubled the amount owed. This can't be legal, Ethan said, reading it again. You can't compel someone to marry as a contract term. You can't, Henry agreed. But you can make refusal so expensive that you have no choice. That's what the lawyer told me. The marriage clause itself isn't enforceable, but the penalty for breaking it is perfectly legal. And I can't pay $9,000, Ethan's mind raced. $9,000 was a fortune. Even if he sold his property, which Western Consolidated was trying to steal anyway, he couldn't raise that kind of money in 2 months. There has to be something, Clara said, her voice tight. Some loophole. Some way to challenge it. I've looked. Henry's shoulders slumped. The only option is to pay it off or honor the marriage agreement. Those are the terms. Ethan read through the contract again, forcing himself to think strategically instead of emotionally. The language was precise, carefully worded to avoid obvious legal challenges, but something nagged at him. A phrase in the 3rd paragraph that seemed oddly specific. This clause here, he said, pointing. About the loan being in good standing. What does that mean exactly? Henry leaned over to look. The monthly payments. As long as I make them on time, the loan stays in good standing. If I miss even one, Brennan can demand full payment immediately. Have you missed any? Not a single one. Been hell scraping the money together sometimes, but I've never been late. Ethan's pulse quickened. And this line, in the event of material misrepresentation by either party, this contract becomes void and all funds must be returned. What would constitute material misrepresentation? I don't know. Brennan's lawyer put that in. Said it was standard protection language. Protection works both ways. Ethan straightened. What if we could prove Brennan misrepresented something material when he made the loan? Like what? Clara leaned closer, hope flickering in her eyes, like his intentions. Like whether this was ever really a business investment or just a scheme to force you into marriage. Ethan started pacing, thinking out loud. If we could show he had no real interest in the boarding house's success, that the loan was just a mechanism to trap you. That's exactly what it was, Henry interrupted. But proving it? His paperwork's clean. His payments documented. How would we show his real motives? Witnesses. Documentation. Other people he's done this to. Ethan stopped pacing, turned to face them. Brennan is a mine superintendent, right? That means he works for Western Consolidated. And those men who came to the ranch specifically said he had business interests with the company. They're connected, Clara breathed. The pressure on you and the pressure on me. It's all coordinated, which means they might have coordinated before. Ethan's mind clicked through connections. If Brennan has a pattern of using loans to control people, if Western Consolidated has a pattern of using legal threats to steal property, that's not business. That's fraud. And fraud could void the contract. Henry's eyes widened. The newspaper. There was a reporter asking questions last month about Western Consolidated's practices. Something about suspicious land acquisitions and local officials being pressured. Who? Marcus Reed. Writes for the Carterville Chronicle. He came by asking if I'd had any dealings with Western Consolidated or their associates. I told him no, because technically Brennan isn't Western Consolidated. He just works for them, but the connection exists. Ethan felt pieces falling into place. Tomorrow we go to Carterville. Talk to this reporter. See what he's found. If there's a pattern, if other people have been targeted the same way, we might be able to prove conspiracy, Clara finished. Make the contract void based on fraud. It's a long shot, Henry warned. But it's more hope than I've had in months. A sound from outside. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses stopping in front of the boarding house. Ethan moved to the window, pulled the curtain back carefully. 4 men dismounted in the street, their faces illuminated by the porch lamp. One of them was the scarred man from the ranch. They know we're here, he said quietly. Clara joined him at the window, her face draining of color. The third one. That's Brennan. Ethan studied the man. Mid-40s, well-dressed, with the kind of cultivated charm that probably served him well in business. Nothing in his appearance suggested the predator underneath. The man who'd terrorize a family to get what he wanted. Should we run? Henry asked. There's a back door. No. Ethan's voice came out hard. Running just delays this. Better to face it now. On our terms, Ethan. He'll what? Force you to marry him right here in front of witnesses. Make threats he can't afford to follow through on with the town watching. Ethan moved away from the window. No. He's here to intimidate. To remind you what you're up against. So let's remind him right back. The knock came hard, authoritative. The sound of someone who expected doors to open for them. Henry started to rise, but Ethan put a hand on his shoulder. Let me. He opened the door to find Brennan on the porch, flanked by his men, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Well, Brennan said. Ethan Sawyer, I presume. You're quite a distance from your little ranch. Having water troubles? Nothing I can't handle. State your business, Brennan. Ethan didn't move from the doorway. My business is with Miss Hartwell. Is she here? He tried to peer past Ethan into the boarding house. I'll speak with you. Clara appeared beside Ethan, her chin lifted defiantly. But Mr. Sawyer stays, of course. Brennan's smile widened. I'm not here to make trouble, Clara. Just to remind you of certain obligations. The calendar's running down, my dear. February will be here before you know it. I'm aware of the calendar. Good. Because I'd hate for your father to suffer unnecessarily. The threat was delivered pleasantly, almost casually. This is a lovely boarding house. Be a shame if it suffered more. Accidents. Structural problems can be so expensive to repair. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Of course, all of that goes away if you simply honor your commitment. Marry me, and your father's debts disappear. The boarding house gets the repairs it needs. Everyone wins, except Clara, Ethan said, who gets trapped in a marriage she doesn't want. Brennan's eyes shifted to him, and the pleasant facade cracked slightly. This doesn't concern you, Sawyer. You have your own problems. Western Consolidated's lawyers are quite thorough, I understand. Something about disputed water rights. Must be stressful, facing that kind of legal battle. We'll manage, will you? Brennan stepped closer. See, that's the thing about fighting powerful interests. They have resources you can't match. Patience you can't outlast. You might win a battle here and there, but the war? You've already lost. Both of you, is that what you came here to say? Clara's voice stayed steady despite the fear Ethan could feel radiating from her. Because if so, you've said it. Now leave, I came to make you an offer. A good one. Brennan pulled a folded paper from his coat. I've talked to Western Consolidated's board. They're willing to make a deal. You marry me as agreed, and they'll drop their claim on Sawyer's water. Everyone gets what they need. The words hit like a physical blow. Ethan felt Clara stiffen beside him. Brennan was offering her a choice, her freedom for the ranch. Her future for Ethan's. No, Ethan said immediately. Absolutely not, it's not your decision. Brennan kept his eyes on Clara. It's hers. So what do you say, darling? Save your father's boarding house and your lover's ranch all at once? Or let pride destroy everyone you care about? Clara's hand found Ethan's, gripped it hard. I need to think about it, she said. Clara, Ethan started, but she squeezed his hand. A silent message, I need time to think, she repeated. To talk to my father. To consider my options. Brennan smiled, sensing victory. Of course. Take until tomorrow evening. Meet me at the hotel. 8 o'clock. We'll discuss terms. He tipped his hat mockingly. Sleep well, Miss Hartwell. Tomorrow you choose who loses everything. He left with his men, their laughter carrying back across the quiet street. Ethan closed the door, turned to find Clara trembling, her father pale and shaking. You can't seriously be considering this, Ethan said. I'm not. Clara's voice was fierce. But I needed him to think I was. Needed him to feel confident. To give us time. Time for what? For you to go to Carterville tonight. Find that reporter. Get whatever evidence he has. She turned to her father. Papa, you know Brennan better than anyone. What's he most afraid of? Henry thought for a moment. Exposure. He's built his reputation on being respectable, connected, influential. If people knew the things he's done, the people he's manipulated, it would destroy him socially. Maybe professionally, then that's our leverage. Clara moved to the table, began gathering the contract papers. Ethan rides to Carterville tonight. Talks to this Reed fellow. Gets evidence of Western Consolidated's pattern of fraud and Brennan's involvement. Tomorrow, we confront Brennan with it. Not to negotiate, but to threaten. Either he tears up the contract and leaves us alone, or we expose everything. That's dangerous, Henry warned. If he calls your bluff, then we follow through. Ethan was already planning. How long to Carterville? How to find a reporter in the middle of the night? We expose him, expose Western Consolidated, and deal with the consequences. It could backfire, Clara said quietly. Could make everything worse, could. Ethan pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. But doing nothing definitely makes it worse. This way we fight. This way we have a chance. She kissed him then. Hard and desperate. A kiss that tasted like fear and determination and the particular courage of people who'd run out of safe options. Go, she whispered against his lips. Find the evidence. I'll hold things together here. Clara, go, Ethan. We don't have time to waste. He went, slipping out the back door into the cold November night, moving through Clearwater streets to where he'd stabled the horses. The ride to Carterville would take 3 hours if he pushed hard. Maybe 4, he'd have to find this reporter, Reed, convince him to share information, and get back before dawn. It was reckless. Desperate. Exactly the kind of risk he'd spent years avoiding, but as Ethan mounted and turned his horse north, he felt something unexpected, clarity. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running from attachment or protecting himself from loss. He was running toward something. Toward truth. Toward justice. Toward the woman who taught him that being brave together was better than being safe alone. The horse's hooves beat out a rhythm on the packed road, and Ethan leaned into the speed, into the night, into the uncertain future. Behind him lay Clearwater and the woman he loved. Ahead lay Carterville and the evidence they needed to win. Mile after mile, one question echoed in his mind: was love worth the risk? Was connection worth the potential pain? The answer became clearer with every hoofbeat: yes. 1,000 times yes, because the alternative, a life lived in fear, in isolation, in careful emptiness, that wasn't safety, that was just a different kind of death. The Carterville Chronicle office occupied a narrow building wedged between a hardware store and a saloon. Lamplight still burning in the upper windows despite the late hour. Ethan tied his exhausted horse and took the stairs 2 at a time, driven by urgency and the knowledge that every minute counted. He found Marcus Reed hunched over a desk covered in papers, a man perhaps 40, with ink-stained fingers and the alert eyes of someone who'd learned to recognize important stories. Reed looked up sharply when Ethan entered, hand moving instinctively toward a desk drawer before relaxing slightly. "We're closed," Reed said. "Come back tomorrow, can't wait that long." Ethan closed the door behind him. "My name's Ethan Sawyer. I own a ranch outside Clearwater. Western Consolidated Mining is trying to steal my water rights. And a man named Victor Brennan is using loan fraud to force a woman into marriage. Henry Hartwell told me you've been investigating Western Consolidated's practices." Reed set down his pen slowly. "That's a lot of accusations for midnight. It's a lot of truth for any hour." Ethan moved closer. "You've been asking questions about Western Consolidated's land acquisitions. I need to know what you found. Why should I tell you? Because tomorrow at 8, Brennan is meeting with the woman he's trying to trap. If I don't have evidence of his fraud by then, she might feel she has no choice but to agree. And if that happens, a good man loses his business, and a good woman loses her freedom." Ethan met Reed's eyes. "You're a reporter. You care about truth. Help me prove it." Reed studied him for a long moment, then pulled a thick folder from his desk. "I've been investigating Western Consolidated for 6 months. Started when a widow in Benton lost her farm after they claimed her water rights were invalid due to a surveyor error from 30 years ago." He spread papers across the desk. Same pattern repeated in 4 other counties. Disputed boundaries, questionable legal claims, properties suddenly becoming available for Western Consolidated's expansion. Brennan involved in any of those, 3 of them directly. He's Western Consolidated's local agent. Identifies properties they want. Finds ways to acquire them. Sometimes through legal pressure, sometimes through financial manipulation. Reed pulled out a newer document. "But I haven't been able to prove coordination." "Everything looks legitimate on paper." Ethan's heart sank. "Then you can't help me." "I didn't say that." Reed pulled out internal correspondence, letters between Brennan and Western Consolidated's lawyers, planning these acquisitions, discussing which properties to target, how to construct legal claims that would be expensive to fight. "That's conspiracy," Ethan breathed. "That's fraud, criminal fraud, if I can verify the documents. But I need more than anonymous papers. I need testimony, corroboration. Something that proves these documents are real." They talked through the night. Reed showed Ethan everything: the pattern of fraudulent claims, the surveyor's statement about fabricated boundary changes, and most damning of all, a letter from Brennan to Western Consolidated's legal team discussing Henry's boarding house as a strategic acquisition opportunity. 6 months before the loan was even made, he planned this from the beginning, Ethan said. The loan, the marriage clause. All of it, which makes the entire contract fraudulent, Reed confirmed. Based on material misrepresentation of intent, then Reed revealed his secret: he wasn't just a reporter. He was working undercover for the Federal Justice Department, investigating Western Consolidated's operations across multiple territories. I have arrest warrants ready, Reed said, for Brennan and several company executives. But I need one more piece, a direct confession. Something that ties everything together. They formulated a plan. Tomorrow night, when Clara met Brennan, Reed would be there with recording equipment. They'd get Brennan to admit his scheme, then arrest him. It was dangerous. But it was their only chance. As dawn approached, Ethan prepared to ride back. But something Reed had pulled out earlier caught his eye: a stack of older documents related to Western Consolidated's various schemes. One folder was labeled Hartwell Investigation, 1882. What's that? Ethan asked. Reed pulled it out. Background research on the Hartwell family. When I was investigating the boarding house loan. He flipped through pages. Nothing unusual. Henry Hartwell, wife deceased 1876. 2 daughters, Clara, who signed the marriage contract, and, Reed stopped. Ethan saw it at the same moment Reed did, a marriage certificate. Dated July 1881, Emma Louise Hartwell to Ethan Michael Sawyer. Emma Hartwell, Reed said slowly. That's the other daughter. The one who disappeared in 1878. Family thought she was dead. He looked up at Ethan. But she married you. In Cheyenne, the world tilted. Emma. Clara Hartwell, the same last name. He'd noticed it when Clara arrived, when she'd introduced herself, but Hartwell was common enough. And Clara was from Clearwater. Emma had been from Cheyenne, except Emma had never told him where she'd grown up before Cheyenne. She'd always been vague about her family, saying they'd been estranged, that she'd left home young. He'd never questioned it. Never thought to connect the pieces. Clara Hartwell wasn't just a woman who'd come to cook for one season. She was Emma's sister, his dead wife's sister, and she had no idea. Ethan rode back to Clearwater in a daze, Marcus Reed's evidence tucked in his saddlebag, but the marriage certificate burned into his mind. Emma Louise Hartwell. Clara and Hartwell, sisters. The sun rose as he reached the outskirts of town, painting everything in shades of rose and gold that felt obscene given the turmoil in his chest. He'd spent the entire ride trying to make sense of it. Emma had left home at 16, she told him once in the early days of their marriage. A fight with her father over something she'd never specified. She'd gone to Cheyenne, found work, reinvented herself. By the time Ethan met her 2 years later, she'd been Emma Hartwell of Cheyenne, no family, no past, just a young woman with hazel eyes and a fierce independence he'd found irresistible. He'd never questioned the gaps in her story. Never thought to dig deeper. And now Clara, who must have been 12 or 13 when Emma left, had somehow ended up at his ranch. Cooking in his kitchen. Sleeping in his arms, loving him. God help them both. The question screaming in his mind: did she know? Had Clara recognized Emma's name when she arrived? Seen the property records? Put the pieces together and said nothing, or was this truly coincidence? 2 sisters, separated by tragedy and geography, brought together by circumstances neither could have predicted. He needed to know. Needed to see her face when he asked, but first, they had to survive the next 12 hours. Clara was waiting at the hotel when he arrived, pacing the hallway outside her room. When she saw him, relief washed over her face. You made it, she breathed, moving to embrace him. Ethan caught her shoulders gently, held her at arm's length. Studied her face, those hazel eyes. The shape of her nose. The way her hair caught the morning light, so much like Emma. How had he not seen it before? What's wrong? Clara asked, reading his expression. We need to talk. After. He couldn't do this now. couldn't unravel everything when they were this close to stopping Brennan. Reed gave us what we need. He's coming tonight with recording equipment. We get Brennan to confess, Reed arrests him. It's over, that simple, that complicated. Ethan finally pulled her close, needing the contact even as his mind screamed with questions. But we have a chance. They spent the day preparing. Reed arrived mid-afternoon, disguised as a traveling salesman, and set up his equipment in an adjoining hotel room. The plan was straightforward. Clara would meet Brennan in the hotel restaurant at 8. Ethan and Reed would be in the next room, listening through the wall. If Brennan made any incriminating statements, Reed would record them. If things turned dangerous, Ethan would intervene. It was risky. But it was all they had. As evening approached, Clara changed into her best dress, simple but elegant, the dark green fabric bringing out the amber in her eyes. Ethan watched her prepare, and his heart broke a little more with each moment. She looked so much like Emma in that moment. The way she tilted her head. The precise movements of her hands. Ethan. Clara turned from the mirror. You've been quiet all day. What did Reed tell you? What aren't you saying? Everything. Nothing. The truth that would shatter whatever fragile thing they'd built, after, he said. I promise. After we deal with Brennan, we'll talk about everything. She studied him, clearly unconvinced, but nodded. All right. After, at 7:50, Clara descended to the hotel restaurant. Ethan watched from the second-floor landing, then moved into position in the adjoining room where Reed had set up his equipment. Can you hear her? Ethan asked. Reed adjusted the listening device, a crude affair involving a glass pressed against the wall and a speaking tube, but surprisingly effective. Perfectly. She just sat down. At 8 exactly, Victor Brennan entered the restaurant. Through the wall, they heard his voice, smooth and confident. Clara. You look lovely. Let's skip the pleasantries, Victor. You wanted to discuss terms, direct as always. I've always admired that about you. A pause, probably Brennan sitting down. I assume you've thought about my offer. Your freedom and your father's security in exchange for a simple, yes. Why do you want me? Clara's voice was steady. Really want me? You could have any woman in Clearwater. Why go to such lengths? A longer pause. When Brennan spoke again, something had shifted in his tone. Darker. More honest. Do you know what it's like to lose everything that matters? To watch it slip away and be powerless to stop it. I lost my mother when I was 13, I lost my daughter when she was 12. Brennan's voice cracked slightly. Sarah. Scarlet fever, 1880. My wife blamed me, said I was never home, too focused on work, didn't call the doctor soon enough. She left. Divorced me. I had nothing. Reed glanced at Ethan, eyebrows raised. This was unexpected. 2 years later, Brennan continued, I saw you at your mother's grave. You were putting flowers on her headstone. The way the light caught your hair, the set of your shoulders, you looked exactly like Sarah would have looked if she'd lived. Same age. Same, everything. Clara's voice came out very quiet. I'm not your daughter, Victor, I know that. Logically, I know that. A sound like glass being set down too hard. But I also know that having you in my life makes the emptiness bearable. The loan, the contract, I didn't do it to trap you. I did it to save myself. Silence. Ethan could imagine Clara processing this, trying to find the right words. That's not love, Victor, she said finally. That's obsession. And it's not fair to me or my father. Life isn't fair. Brennan's voice hardened. Your father took my money. You signed the contract. Those are the terms. And in 2 months, you'll honor them, or everyone you love suffers. What if I could prove the contract was fraudulent? Clara asked. Would you still demand I honor it? Fraudulent how? the loan was never meant to help my father, was it? You identified the boarding house as a strategic property for Western Consolidated 6 months before you even approached him. I have documentation proving it. Ethan tensed. This was the moment. You're bluffing, Brennan said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Am I? Marcus Reed from the Carterville Chronicle has been investigating Western Consolidated for months. He has internal correspondence between you and the company's lawyers. Letters discussing the boarding house as an acquisition target. Plans for how to leverage my father's desperation. Clara's voice stayed calm. It's all documented, Victor. You're fraud. Western Consolidated's conspiracy. Everything. Silence. Then Brennan laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You think you're clever, don't you? Think you've outwitted me? His voice rose. That contract is legal. The loan is real. Documentation from Reed won't change the fact that your father owes $9,000 he can't pay. No, Clara said. But it will destroy your reputation. Your position with Western Consolidated. Everything you've built since Sarah died. Is forcing me to marry you really worth losing all of that? You don't understand. Brennan's voice cracked completely now. Without you, I have nothing. The company, the reputation, it's all hollow. You're the only thing that makes it bearable. Then let me go, Clara said softly. Grieve your daughter properly. Get help. But don't drag me into your pain. I can't. The sound of a chair scraping back violently. Don't you see? I can't let you go. You're all I have left of her. Reed was already moving toward the door. That's enough. I'm going in, but before he could reach it, they heard other sounds from the restaurant. A scuffle. Clara's voice, sharp, let go of me. Ethan didn't think. He ran. He burst into the restaurant to find Brennan gripping Clara's arm, trying to pull her toward the exit. 2 of his men had appeared from somewhere, blocking the other patrons, mostly townspeople who looked shocked and frightened. Let her go, Ethan said quietly. Brennan spun, still holding Clara. His face was wild, desperate. This doesn't concern you, Sawyer. She's mine. The contract says, the contract is void. Reed appeared behind Ethan, pulling out a badge. Marcus Reed, Federal Justice Department. Victor Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and now attempted kidnapping. For a moment, everything hung suspended. Brennan's men looked at each other, calculating whether to fight. The townspeople pressed back against the walls. Clara stood very still in Brennan's grip. Then Henry Hartwell stepped through the restaurant entrance, and everything changed. Let my daughter go, Victor, Henry said quietly. But his voice carried weight. Behind him stood what looked like half of Clearwater, shopkeepers, farmers, townspeople who'd known the Hartwell family for years. Brennan looked around at the faces surrounding him. Looked at Reed's badge. Looked at Clara, who met his gaze steadily. I just wanted to save her, Brennan whispered. Like I couldn't save Sarah. I know, Clara said, her voice gentle despite everything. But you can't save someone by trapping them. That's not love, Victor. That's just fear wearing a different face. Brennan's hand loosened. Clara pulled free, moved to stand beside Ethan. Reed stepped forward with handcuffs. Victor Brennan, you have the right to, I know my rights. Brennan held out his wrists. The fight had drained out of him, leaving only exhaustion. The contract. It's in my room. 3rd floor. Burn it. I don't care anymore. One of Reed's associates retrieved the original contract. They burned it in the hotel's fireplace while the whole town watched. The papers curled and blackened, and with them, the hold Brennan had maintained for 2 years. Henry embraced his daughter, both of them crying. The townspeople congratulated them. Reed processed Brennan with professional efficiency, and Ethan stood apart, watching Clara celebrate her freedom, knowing that in a few hours, he'd have to tell her the truth that would change everything. It was past midnight when Clara finally knocked on his hotel room door. "Can I come in?" Ethan stepped aside. She entered, still wearing the green dress, exhaustion written in every line of her body. "We did it," she said, sinking into a chair. "It's over. Brennan's arrested. The contract's destroyed. My father's free." She looked up at Ethan. And for the first time all night, really looked at him. "So why do you look like someone died, Clara?" Ethan sat across from her. "When I went to Carterville, Reed had been researching your father. Background for the investigation, okay, he found some old records. About your family." Clara's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "What kind of records? You had a sister. Emma. She left home when you were young." All the color drained from Clara's face. "How do you know about Emma?" "Because I married her," Ethan said quietly. "July 1881, in Cheyenne. She died giving birth to our daughter 6 months later. Both of them died." The words hung in the air between them. Clara stood slowly, walked to the window, stared out at the dark street. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Emma. My sister Emma. You're telling me that Emma married you? I didn't know she had family. She told me she'd left home young, that her parents were dead. I never questioned it." Ethan stood too, but didn't approach. "I didn't know until Reed showed me the records. Didn't know you were her sister until a few hours ago." Clara pressed her hand against the glass. "She wasn't dead. All these years, my father and I thought she'd run away and died somewhere. We looked for her. Advertised. Hired people to search." A sob broke through. "And she was in Cheyenne. Married. Pregnant. And we never knew." "Clara, don't." She held up a hand. "Just, don't." Silence filled the room. Outside, Clearwater slept, unaware of the private grief unfolding in the hotel. Finally, Clara turned to face him. Tears tracked down her face, but her voice was steady. "The box," she said. "In your room at the ranch. The one with the rings and the photograph. I found it when I was cleaning. I saw her picture, and I thought she looked familiar. But I told myself I was imagining it. That grief makes you see things that aren't there." "I should have told you. From the beginning." "Told me what?" "That you'd been married to a woman I hadn't seen in 6 years. How could you have known?" Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "When Emma left, I was 12. She was 18. We'd been fighting, the way sisters fight. Stupid things. Borrowed clothes. Boys. Nothing that mattered." She moved to sit on the bed, and Ethan saw her fold in on herself, making her body small. "The night she left, she came to my room. Told me she couldn't stay in Clearwater anymore, that she needed to find her own life. I was angry. Told her she was selfish. Told her if she left, I never wanted to see her again." "Clara, you were a child." "I was old enough to know words have weight." Clara looked up at him. "And then she was just gone. My father searched for months. We thought maybe she'd been hurt, killed even. We had no closure. Just absence." "I'm sorry," Ethan said, and meant it with his whole heart. "For what?" "For loving her. For giving her 6 months of happiness before she died." Clara's voice broke. "Or for loving me without knowing I was connected to your greatest loss." Ethan crossed to her then, knelt in front of her, took her hands in his. "I'm sorry for not being able to save her," he said. "For not being there when it mattered. For spending 3 years running from her memory instead of honoring it. And I'm sorry that fate or coincidence or whatever brought you to my ranch without either of us knowing the truth." "Did you recognize me?" Clara asked. "When I arrived? Did some part of you know?" Your eyes, Ethan admitted. That first day, when I saw your eyes, I thought of Emma. The same color, the same light in them. But I told myself it was coincidence. That I was seeing ghosts where there were none. Clara pulled her hands free, stood, moved away from him. I need to know something, she said, her back to him. And I need you to be completely honest. Anything, did you? She stopped, gathered courage. Did you fall in love with me because I reminded you of her? Because some part of you saw Emma when you looked at me? The question cut deeper than any blade. Ethan stood, walked to her, gently turned her to face him. No, he said firmly. I fell in love with you because you're brave where Emma was cautious. Because you challenged me where she supported. Because you made me want to fight when she made me want to hide. He cupped her face in his hands. You're not her replacement, Clara. You're not even her echo. You're entirely your own person. And that's who I love, but she's between us now, Clara whispered. Her memory. Her death. The child you lost. How do we move forward knowing all of that? I don't know, Ethan admitted. But I know I don't want to lose you too. I know that what we've built together is real and separate from what I had with Emma. And I know that Emma's last words to me were, don't let this break you. Live, he rested his forehead against Clara's. Maybe this is what she meant. Maybe she knew somehow that grief could either destroy me or teach me. And maybe, his voice caught. Maybe you coming into my life wasn't coincidence. Maybe it was Emma's final gift. A sister I could love. A future I could build. A way to honor her by living instead of hiding. Clara's tears fell freely now, and Ethan tasted salt when she kissed him. I'm so angry at her, Clara sobbed. For leaving. For not telling us she was alive. For dying before I could tell her I was sorry. I know, but I'm grateful too. Because she loved you. And somehow, impossibly, so do I. They held each other in the dark hotel room, two people bound by loss and love and the ghost of a woman who'd connected them across years and miles. What do we do now? Clara asked eventually. Now, Ethan said, we go home. To the ranch. We tell your father the truth. We visit Emma's grave together. And we decide if what we have is strong enough to carry the weight of what came before, and if it's not, then at least we'll know we tried. That we didn't run from the hard thing. He pulled back to look at her. That's all anyone can ask. They left Clearwater the next morning, riding slowly this time, not rushing toward anything but moving with purpose. Clara sat her horse with new weight on her shoulders, grief for the sister she'd lost twice, relief for her father's freedom, and uncertainty about what came next. Henry had taken the news about Emma with shock and sorrow. He'd wept for the daughter he'd lost, for the grandchild he'd never known. But he'd also given his blessing to Ethan and Clara. Emma would want you both to be happy, Henry had said, gripping Ethan's hand. She was always generous with love. She wouldn't want her death to prevent life. Now they rode through Wyoming territory, the landscape vast and indifferent to human drama. Tell me about her, Clara said as they followed the road north. About Emma. Not the grief. The life, so Ethan told her. About how they'd met in a Cheyenne boarding house where Emma worked as a seamstress. About her laugh, which came quick and easy. About the way she'd hum while working, unconscious melodies that filled rooms with music. About her kindness to strangers, her fierce loyalty to friends, her absolute certainty that love was worth any risk. Clara listened, and slowly, the sister she'd thought dead came back to life in Ethan's words. She sounds wonderful, Clara said. She was. And she was flawed too. Stubborn. Secretive, apparently. Ethan smiled sadly. She made choices I don't understand, leaving your family, not reaching out, keeping her past hidden. But I loved her anyway. That's what love is. Seeing the whole person and choosing them. Is that what you're doing with me? Clara asked quietly. Choosing me despite the complication. Despite the past, no. Ethan reached over, took her hand. I'm choosing you because of who you are. The complication and the past are just context. They don't define us unless we let them. They rode in silence for a while, hands linked between their horses. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in impossible colors, they stopped to make camp. After dinner, as stars emerged overhead, Clara spoke again. I want to see her grave. When we get back, we will. Together, and then I want to make a decision. About us. About whether we can build something real knowing everything we know now. That's fair. Clara looked at him across the fire. I'm scared, Ethan. Scared that I'll always be measuring myself against her. Scared that you'll see her when you look at me. Scared that we're building on a foundation that can't hold. I'm scared too, Ethan admitted. Scared of losing you the way I lost her. Scared that opening my heart again is just inviting more pain. Scared that I'm not strong enough for this, so what do? We do it anyway. He moved around the fire to sit beside her. We're scared and we do it anyway. Because the alternative, walking away from something real because it's complicated, that's not courage. That's just another kind of cowardice. Clara leaned against him, and they sat together under stars that had witnessed countless human dramas and would witness countless more. Emma used to tell me, Clara said softly, that brave isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the thing that scares you because it matters more than the fear. She told me the same thing, Ethan said. Different words, but the same meaning. Then let's be brave, Clara decided. Let's see this through. Not because it's easy, but because it matters. They reached the ranch 3 days later, and Sam met them with questions in his weathered eyes. Ethan told him everything: Brennan's arrest, the contract's destruction, Clara's connection to Emma. Sam listened without interrupting, and when Ethan finished, the old foreman just nodded. Life's strange sometimes, Sam said. Brings people together in ways that don't make sense until later. You two figure out what you need to figure out. The ranch will be here when you're done. The next morning, Ethan and Clara rode out to the cemetery where Emma rested. It was a small plot on a hillside overlooking the valley, marked by a simple headstone: Emma Louise Sawyer 1859–1881, beloved wife. She chose love. Clara knelt before the stone, traced the letters with her fingers. Tears fell, silent and steady. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I said I never wanted to see you again. I'm sorry I didn't look harder. I'm sorry I didn't get to tell you I loved you one more time. Ethan stood back, giving her space for private grief. After a long while, Clara spoke again, her voice stronger. I met someone, Emma. Someone good. Someone who loved you very much. And I think I love him too. I hope that's okay. I hope it doesn't make me disloyal or wrong. I hope you'd understand. The wind blew through the grass, carrying the smell of sage and earth. He makes me brave, Clara continued. The way you always tried to teach me to be. And I think maybe you sent him to me. Or sent me to him. Either way, I think you'd approve. She stood, turned to Ethan. I need to know one more thing, she said. And then I can decide. What did Emma know? When she was dying? Did she know about the baby? Did she get to hold her daughter? Ethan's throat tightened. He'd never spoken about this. Not to anyone. Yes, he said. For 3 hours. We named her Rose. Emma held her, sang to her. Told her she was loved. And when Rose stopped breathing, Emma was still holding her. He moved to stand beside Clara, looking down at the grave. Emma's last words weren't about fear or regret. They were about hope. She made me promise not to let grief turn me to stone. To live. To find joy again. He looked at Clara. I think she knew, somehow, that I'd need that permission. That I'd use her death as an excuse to hide if she didn't explicitly tell me not to. Clara took his hand. She was wiser than either of us knew. Yeah, they stood together in the cemetery, the living and the dead connected by love and loss and the strange paths that brought people together. Finally, Clara spoke. I can't replace her. I won't even try. I'm not asking you to, but I can love you. And I can build something with you that honors her memory by being alive and real and brave. She turned to face him fully. If you'll have me. Knowing everything we know. Carrying everything we carry, Ethan cupped her face in his hands, the way he'd done with Emma years ago, but this was different. This was Clara. Fully herself. I love you, he said. Not because you're Emma's sister. Not because you remind me of her. But because you're Clara Hartwell, the woman who walked into my life and refused to let me hide anymore. The woman who taught me that second chances exist if you're brave enough to take them. Then ask me, Clara said. Properly. With all the weight of what we know, Ethan knelt before her, there in the cemetery with his first wife's grave at his back and his future standing before him. Clara and Hartwell, he said. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me knowing it won't be perfect? Will you risk everything for the possibility that we can make something beautiful out of all this grief? Yes, Clara said, pulling him to his feet. Yes to all of it. The risk, the grief, the possibility. Yes, they kissed there among the graves, and if ghosts existed, Ethan hoped Emma was watching. Hoped she understood that this wasn't betrayal, it was the living choosing to live. 6 months later, Wyoming Territory, May 1885, the ranch had changed. Not in structure, the buildings were the same, the land unchanged, but in feeling. Where once it had been a fortress against the world, it had become a home. Clara had expanded the garden, planted wildflowers along the fence line. The crew ate meals that had become legendary in the territory, and the bunkhouse rang with laughter instead of complaints. Sam had fully reconciled with Ethan, the forgiveness between them complete. The old foreman now taught both Ethan and Clara about managing grief, about carrying loss without being crushed by it. Western Consolidated had withdrawn from Wyoming after Reed's investigation exposed their fraud. Victor Brennan was serving 15 years in territorial prison. Word from Henry suggested he was getting help for his grief, finally mourning his daughter properly, and Ethan and Clara had married in February, a small ceremony with the crew and townspeople, with flowers on Emma's grave and Henry's blessing and Sam standing as best man. Now, in May, as spring transformed the valley, Clara stood in the doorway of their bedroom, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. Ethan, she called. Can you come here? He appeared from the barn, concern on his face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She took his hand, placed it on her stomach. But I saw the doctor in Carterville yesterday when I went for supplies. Understanding dawned slowly. Then all at once, you're 3 months along. I wanted to be sure before I told you. Ethan's hand trembled against her stomach. Every fear he'd carried since Emma's death came rushing back, the blood, the helplessness, the double loss. I know you're scared, Clara said quietly. I'm scared too. But we're not doing this alone. We have Dr. Morrison in Carterville. We have time to prepare. We have each other. What if we're brave? Clara interrupted, echoing the words they'd spoken over Emma's grave. What if we choose hope instead of fear? Ethan pulled her close, his heart hammering against his ribs. Fear and joy and terror and hope all tangled together. A baby, he whispered. Our baby, Clara confirmed. Not a replacement for Rose. Not a way to fix the past. Just ours. A new beginning. He thought of Emma. Of Rose. Of the life that had been taken too soon, and he thought of Clara. Of the life they were building together. Of the future that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. Together, he asked, the question carrying the weight of everything they'd overcome. Together, Clara promised. They stood in the doorway, the Wyoming sun warm on their faces, the ranch spreading out before them. Behind them, the past, Grief and loss and lessons learned the hard way. Ahead, the future, uncertain and frightening and full of impossible promise. Ethan placed his hand on Clara's stomach again, felt the possibility of life growing there, and for the first time since Emma's death, he felt something that might have been peace, not the absence of fear. Not the erasure of grief, but the courage to move forward anyway, to choose love, even when love meant risk, to choose life, even when life meant loss, to choose hope, even when hope was terrifying. Emma's words echoed across the years, "Don't let this break you." Live, and finally, Ethan understood what she'd meant. Living wasn't about avoiding pain or protecting yourself from loss. Living was about opening your heart to the possibility of joy, even when you knew how much it could hurt. Living was about standing beside someone and saying, "Together," knowing you couldn't control the outcome but choosing to try anyway. Living was about planting wildflowers on graves and gardens and yards and hope in uncertain futures. Living was about loving Clara, and the child she carried, with the same fierce devotion he'd loved Emma, not because the past didn't matter, but because the present mattered more. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Clara replied, and in the distance. If you listened carefully, you might have heard the Wyoming wind carry something that sounded like laughter, or maybe just the promise of spring. Either way, it was enough. Thank you for staying with Ethan and Clara through this journey of loss, love, and second chances. Their story reminds us that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about finding the courage to open our hearts again, even when we know how much it can hurt. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and share where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how these frontier tales travel around the world, connecting us through the universal language of hope and human resilience. Subscribe for more cinematic romance stories where broken souls find each other, where the past doesn't define the future, and where love, real, complicated, terrifying love, is always worth the risk. Until next time, remember, brave isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to love anyway.